Now, earlier today, American President Donald Trump cracked down on Antifa, the anti-fascists, who, I don't use the word organisation because they aren't officially an organisation, but who is running them, who is funding them, how they work together as a network will presumably now become a little clearer after Donald Trump's statements. Today, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio by Andy Ngo, who was at the hearing earlier today. Let's have a listen to how it went.
And then I was ambushed in a mob beating, and I had never been in a fight. I didn't even realize that I was being assaulted until seconds in. And the punches came from everywhere on my head and my face, and I was bleeding out of my eyes and ears. And then they threw all the drinks in my eyes to humiliate me further and to laugh at me. And I was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance and CT scan, and I had subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is bleeding in the brain, and nearly died. And after surviving that, the reporting that I saw in liberal media it seemed to suggest that I had deserved it because they branded me far right.
Joins me in the studio now, Andy. How was it today in there? Was it emotional?
It was. I discussed the instances in the past where I've been beaten, and I kind of relived it in the moment in explaining it. But the forefront of my feelings was gratitude that we have an administration who takes this threat seriously. For many years, I've been reporting on Antifa for about 9 years now. For much of that, I did feel that I was just reporting into the ether. I mean, the prior administration didn't acknowledge that it existed at all, and now we finally have an administration that does and is pledging to treat the militant, violent extremists as the domestic terrorists that they are.
So when you say you've been reported on them for that long period of time, how do you define who they are? Because this is one of the issues, isn't it? And this is why I think they've been able to escape scrutiny for such a long time, because they are quite hard to define.
Yes, although in Portland, it's easier to define because they organize under the banner of Rose City Antifa. Those were the militants who were involved in beating, assaulting me, nearly killing me before. They have other autonomous chapters and cells, you can think of them, across the US, but they are extremely nebulous. They're hard to define in that they're decentralized. It's not a singular organization. You can't just take out the leader and the whole thing falls apart. You can think of it much similar to radical Islam in that there's an idea of violent militant anarchism, communism, and that their propaganda is put out in the ether and individuals are encouraged to organize or, if needed, take direct action at the individual level.
And what happened to you, Andy? And I'm so sorry you had to go through that as a journalist, just trying to do your job and shine a light on something that is really dark. Just, if you don't mind, can you talk us through what did happen to you?
In 2019, I was reporting on one of the many Antifa protests in Portland, and I was ambushed in a beating. And they beat me so severely on the head that I suffered a brain bleed. I nearly died from that. 2 years later, I returned on the ground, and that's the footage that's being shown now. And that was when I was chased through the streets of downtown and tackled to the ground. I was screaming for help, and all of the drivers just drove away. People walked around, and I was held in a chokehold and nearly was passed out from that. I managed to escape from that chokehold to run into a nearby hotel, and a mob amassed outside the hotel and were pounding on the windows trying to break in to get me.
I'm so sorry. We're seeing the footage here, and apologies if it's very distressing at home. We probably should have given this a warning, so we apologise for this. Did anybody get held responsible for that?
No, not in 2021, not in 2019.
And why was that? Is it because the police will say, we have no idea who they are, we can't see their faces, they're completely covered up? Could you have identified them?
Identified some people who I sued in a civil lawsuit. But the difficulty with trying to hold Antifa, for example, Rose City Antifa, accountable is a judge in Oregon dismissed Rose City Antifa from my civil lawsuit because they said they're not a registered entity. How convenient. Portland police closed the cases in my beating attacks because they said they couldn't identify anyone.
Do you think there was political will behind some of those decisions?
Yes, unfortunately in Portland, it's one of those jurisdictions completely run by Democrats. And Antifa function in many ways as shock troops for Democrats. Their goals are different, but their targets of violence and opposition are the same. And when you have a prosecutor who is compromised, and judges and potential jurors, police departments who are under political leadership, I think it's why I was not the first to be beaten by Antifa, and I wasn't the last. There was somebody who was assassinated in 2020.
Well, there will be fewer, we hope, as of today, because of the actions of President Trump. Why do you think he's made this an important issue for him to tackle? What is it about Donald Trump that means that he hates this? It's quite hard to read when he was sat there in the room. He can look quite impassive, can't he, sometimes? He's listening, though. You can see he's listening. But why is this important to him?
I wonder if the assassination of Charlie Kirk pushed it over the line. I mean, legally, for an administration, it's going to be really difficult because the way Antifa organizes that they're decentralized and they operate on deception. So the DOJ will have a lot of work to do. But the messages that were written on the rifle cartridges in the assassination of Mr. Kirk seemed to suggest that the suspect had beliefs that were sympathetic or aligned with Antifa beliefs.
Eric Ham was here earlier, and he was saying, look, this is, because they are so nebulous, as you said, it's impossible to hold these people accountable as terrorists because they are anti-lots of things, anti-racism, anti-hatred, anti-discrimination, they would say. And therefore, is the risk here that Donald Trump and Republicans can just point at someone and say, you're Antifa, and ascribe them an ideology which they may not have? They might just be a thug that likes to go out beating people up.
Well, the charge is that potentially what the DOJ could look at using to prosecute people is conspiracy. So that has a certain threshold of evidence that's required. Organization, which does happen. Communications, which does happen on these signal apps using burner phones. These are, in places like Portland, they are extremely organized. You don't have individuals who come up spontaneously wearing the same black uniforms with individuals bringing certain weapons and others acting as getaway drivers without some type of coordination.
How well coordinated do you think it is in the UK? Because you spend most of your time living in London, don't you?
In the UK, it's entirely different in that for one, firearms are removed from the picture.
Yeah.
So in the US, it's so dangerous because these people are told to kill their opposition, and some of them do take that type of action. So in the UK, it's been more so protests organized on the ground. They were involved in some violence last year when there were protests that were that broke out across the UK, and they organized counter demonstrations. But that was more brawls. So,
but you think you can look across a protest, and I imagine with your experience in the way that you are so vigilant to these individuals, I bet you can spot them a mile off in a crowd, can't you?
I can, yes.
Well, that's why you were there today in the White House as an expert witness on this case. So will you sleep more easily tonight, Andy, knowing that this is now an issue which the president is taking seriously?
You know, threats ebb and flow for people in the public eye who are somehow seen as a threat to the violent far left. And for a time, I was a bit more relaxed. It's been many years since some of these assaults, but then with the murder of Charlie Kirk and some of the threats that have resurged since then, I don't rest fully comfortably.
Andy, it's such a joy to meet you. I've been dying to meet you anyway, so it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being here and joining GB News tonight.